All right, well, today we're going to get a demo of Billables AI. And Nancy and Arvind, glad you're here to do this. But why don't you first start by first introducing each of yourselves? And I'm going to ask you to then give me a little bit of a background on the company before we actually get into the demo. But Nancy, you want to kick it off?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy. I'm a co-founder of Billables AI. We are an automated timekeeping platform. And my path to founding this company actually started many, many years ago when I was a timekeeper myself and had to suffer through timesheets and everything else. I actually left that world, then went to Google, spent 7 years at Pinterest before building Billables with Arvind. So excited to be here and share more. And I'll pass it to Arvind.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Arvind, also co-founder of Billables. I'm an engineer by trade. So my path I did my PhD at Stanford in AI, machine learning, and computer systems. And I was the co-founder of a fintech company that was using machine learning to do credit scoring for consumers. And then most recently was the VP of engineering at a startup called Salmonova Systems. So I was building enterprise AI platforms, training big models, working with lots of enterprise customers to apply AI to various use cases. And I kind of came through this through my wife, who's a partner, a law firm, small boutique firm in San Francisco, who described timekeeping as the bane of her existence. And that's something that Nancy and I have heard time and time again now as we've talked to more and more lawyers, and really talking to my wife and so many people since then. We really found that this is just such a perfect use case for AI. It's something that humans should not really be doing. And so we're really excited to be building billables.
I'm in the Boston area, and I recently learned, I might have known this a long time ago, but I only recently learned that the billable hour was invented in Boston. I think at Ropes and Gray, but it was actually invented by a lawyer at Ropes and Gray, but it was invented for a legal aid office, not for a big firm. This guy was trying to bring efficiency to a legal aid office, and he came up with the idea of having them keep track of their time. And then he transported that idea to his law firm, and the rest is history. And now lawyers have to suffer all the time. So
Wow, that is interesting. Did he come up with the 6-minute increment too? Because that's just
I don't
another
think he
level
came
of
up to say that.
cruelty.
He came up with, and he certainly never foresaw AI or anything else. So anyway, so how long have you guys been in business?
Yeah, we've been around for about a year and a half. So we're relatively new, but we've been growing a lot. We launched our first kind of iteration of our product in early 2024 and have just really picked up speed. Turns out a lot of people hate doing their timesheets and tracking their time. So we've been pleasantly surprised by the adoption.
I don't think I've ever met a lawyer who likes. So what's the best way to proceed? Do you want to kind of just jump into a demo of it, or do you want to give me a little bit of background before?
Sure, I can give you a little bit of background maybe
Okay,
of
okay.
how we kind of started the company. And Arvin mentioned a little bit of our origin story, starting with his wife, really bringing this problem to light. And then it was that aha moment, right, where we kind of realized like, hey, this is actually something that we believe, with all the conversation around AI, like this is the thing that's really ignored and actually what people want to automate and take off their plate. And so we spent several months talking to, dozens of lawyers, kind of figuring out what the needs are, what the pain points are, and what the kind of solution might need to look like to really solve this problem from end to end. Because there has been a number of solutions that maybe tackle different parts of it, but not fully, right? Like enough to kind of maybe numb the pain a little bit, but not take it away. So, there were like these start and stop timers. I mean, those still exist today. That's probably maybe the most prevalent method if you even are able to bill contemporaneously, which many can't. And then a lot of folks are just kind of doing it the old school way where they are writing it down on a piece of paper or kind of trying to recreate their time after the fact. So they'll wait till the end of the week or the end of the month.
End of the month.
Yeah, end of the month. I mean, it happens. We
Been
won't
there,
name
done that.
names, but it is not uncommon. Yeah. It's been known to happen. And, there's a lot of people who really need help. And oftentimes it is the busiest person at the firm that falls into that trap, right? And also the highest biller. So it's just like really painful, right? It's like the managing partner. They already have so much on their plate. They're constantly context switching. They bill at a high rate. So any lost time just hurts that much more. And so what we really set out to build was an end-to-end solution that really tackled the problem holistically, not just piecemeal, not just like one part of it.
Yeah. And maybe I'll just add a little bit to that. I think as we came into this with a very technical team with like deep like AI and ML experience. And over the last year and a half, we've gotten to meet tons of different law firms and lawyers and really like understand how different people work and practice. And one of the things that's really stood out is just how much of as much of an art as a science that billing is and how everyone does it a little bit differently. Different clients have different requirements and demands. And so there is no one size fits all solution. And so I think something that's been very important to us as we built the product and kind of built the company is making sure that we're being just as thoughtful about like the UI, the UX, the ease of use, the ability to transition to something that's fully automated for your timekeeping as we are about the AI and the quality and the accuracy, because I think both are just so important. And as Nancy mentioned, we sometimes get asked like what's different now? People have tried like automated passive timekeeping before. And I think there's a bunch of things that are different. Obviously, the kind of quality of the AI models that we have now is fundamentally different. But we've really invested a lot of, we think, time and energy into figuring out how do you put all the right pieces together so that this is something where users can really, as much as possible, like set it and forget it and kind of be really lightweight about their time management and allow the AI to do as much as possible.
You kind of just answered what I was going to ask, which is that when you were starting this company, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. I mean, there were already products on the market that did automated timekeeping in some way, shape, or form. Oral maybe being one of the best known, or used to be called Time by Ping. And certainly others out there. Then like Smokeball has some automated timekeeping. I think my case has some, and I don't know if other practice management. So you looked around the market a little bit when you were starting this, and so how did you see where was the gap in what was already out there, and how do you kind of fill that gap, or how do you distinguish yourself from what's already on the market?
Maybe I could take a first stab at that. So, I think what was really interesting to us when we first started the company and when like interviewed like so many different lawyers and other professional service providers was that even though there were some, tools on the market already, the vast majority were still doing it by hand, right? Still taking notes on a notepad on their desk or on a Word doc or a Google spreadsheet or sending themselves emails or using timers. And so, obviously one of the questions then we then ask ourselves is why, right? Why hasn't there been more adoption of some of these other tools? And I think the challenge has been, unless you really solve it in a really like holistic way that feels very personal and very much like in the voice of each individual user, and it looks like a timesheet that they would have written themselves, it's a lot of work, right? To go back and try to like review, all of these entries that might get generated or all the time that gets captured. It's actually really easy to capture like every click that somebody does on their computer, but it's much harder to go from that to an actual like client bill that they would want to like quickly like review and approve and send to a client. And so I think that's where we saw a lot of the gap was that it's just technically it's a really challenging problem. I think AI, really wasn't there even a few years ago to be able to have the engine to solve it well. And even with the models that we have today, there's a lot of like tooling and kind of systems you have to put around it to get to the point where it really is learning from each user. It's really personalized. It's at the right level of granularity of the kind of work that they're doing. It has the right sophistication in the narratives for clients to accept those so that it's actually less work to go to this as opposed to more work, which I think was true with some of the tools in the past.
Sort of like when we try and use AI to write something for you, and you end up spending more time trying to clean it up and rewrite it than if you had just written it for yourself in the first place. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Quality and accuracy like really matters in all AI applications, and I think this is no exception at all, right? Like if it doesn't cross that critical threshold of being super easy to use and really close to what you want, then I think most users will say, it sucks, but I'll just do it myself.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Go.
So all that led us to the product that we have, which I'm happy to dive into if you're ready.
Let's do it.
All right. I will share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen. Great. So this is the dashboard of Billables AI. And as you see here, there are a number of time entries that are generated. And actually everything that you see on this screen was entirely generated by Billables. So to Arvind's point earlier about really creating a holistic time entry, what we're doing here is we are creating these entries that have all the components of what you would need to bill. And ideally, the role that you have is to come in and kind of quickly look through and validate that this is, tracking with the activity that you recall, and you can quickly approve it and issue your bill. So I'm going to unpack a little bit of what's happening behind the scenes because I think it's a lot to kind of digest. What is actually leading to this, I think, is the number one question we get. So if you look at these time entries, each of these are coming from different sources. So mail, calendar, browser. We actually share a little more information on the source activity that led to that time entry. So you can see here an explanation that kind of outlines the emails that led to that time entry being created. We then calculate the duration. So this is the amount of time that was spent, in this case, drafting, sending emails. We auto assign it to a client and matter that you see here, and then we generate a narrative description. And this narrative, out of the box follows industry best practices for narrative. So active verbs, standard naming conventions, things like that. So if you look at this and you say, this looks good to go, you can kind of approve it with one click. But, you know, there's always instances where we may not get it right, or you may just want to personalize things a little bit more. So you can edit any of these fields. You can reassign the client and matter. You can include activity task codes. You can change the narrative. So let's say you want it to be present tense instead of past tense. And all of those changes that I listed, everything that you edit actually informs how the platform works for you. So it gets better the more that you use it, and it gets more personalized. So it'll start to pick up on the way that you write your narratives, the way that you group your time entries in a block bill or not, that it's assigned to the most relevant client or matter, even if there's not really obvious signals that it belongs to that client or matter. We're really picking up on those revisions that you're making.
Did you say, I know you mentioned email and calendar. Is this picking up from all the work you're doing if you're working in Word or whatever else as well?
Yes, it is. And that's actually a great segue into kind of the approach that we have and how we get this data.
Yeah, okay.
We have built our platform to really utilize direct integrations with the most commonly used and trusted work software. So we have integrations built with Microsoft, Outlook, Word, Office, the whole suite, Google Workspace, Adobe, Zoom, RingCentral, so on and so forth. And the reason that we built our platform as an integration-led platform is we wanted to make sure that we were really responding to the feedback we were hearing. So a lot of folks have issues with, having something that's a heavy piece of software that sits on their computer and screen grabs every few seconds, right? So we deliberately chose a different path. Instead of having something that kind of screen captures and then you triangulate the time entry from there, we're actually going directly to the source and building in these integrations, and we're getting that data directly from the Microsofts and Googles of the world. And so it's more privacy friendly. It's more accurate because we have that metadata direct from the source. And one of the biggest benefits that people see is a lot of these API integrations, which you can see a lot of our integrations here, allow us to capture activity across devices. So if you are sending an email from your phone or joining a Zoom call from your tablet, we're capturing all of that because it's going through your Outlook account, it's going through your Zoom account, and we're integrated directly there. So think of all the times that you are doing those things, right? More and more people are on the go. They're not just working solely at their desk. When you are commuting and taking care of client work, that is oftentimes underbilled. And we've seen from folks that they can recover 10 to 30% more billable time through our integrations.
I think just to kind of emphasize there is that once you set up billables through these integrations, that's a one-time thing, and then you never have to turn it on or off again. It's just always going to capture that activity and generate these entries in the background, whether, as Nancy said, you're on your phone, your computer, your tablet. And that's actually a little bit different than some other kind of screen recording or time recording software that you kind of have to hit play and then hit stop, right? And then it kind of starts and stops capturing. This is just always happening. You don't even have to have the web page up or anything. You can just come to it when you want to review your thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we've seen, a lot of folks don't come to our site and we're okay with it, right? You don't have to worry about billing until you're ready to worry about it. And so they'll come in at the end of the day or week or month and have it all here for them to kind of approve and quickly bill. So yeah, the example I shared with you was email, but obviously we have other integrations. So you can see here, this is a calendar event. It's scheduled for 30 minutes, so we have that 0.5. But if this calendar event actually had a Teams or Zoom call attached to it, we would use that. So you can see in this example that it was a scheduled calendar event that actually ran over. The meeting ran over as they do. And so we include the true duration. So we'll use that more accurate time whenever it's available, but there's always the fallback of the scheduled time.
Just ask you a
Similarly,
quick question.
yeah.
How are you identifying the client and the matter? I mean, with email, it's probably a little bit easier because you have an email address associated. How do you figure out what matter this is and what client this is for the time being spent?
Yeah, so the AI is actually going to look at like everything. It's going to look at the metadata around that email, things like who was it being sent to. It's also going to look at the content, right? The subject, the body, and it's going to look for any kind of contextual clues around, is this something that seems related to this client or this matter? And that can be like, oh, well, I know that like this person or this email address is related to this client. It can be, contextual references in the subject or in the body of the email. Folks don't need to actually, like in some cases and like previous timekeeping software, you had to like specifically say the matter code in a certain format. Like that's not required here. It'll just try to pick up on any clues it has to make the best guess it can.
And when you're working in Word, say, or Google Doc or something, same thing. It's just kind of look at the context and try and figure it out.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll, in our time entries, provide a link to the source document or email so that you can kind of quickly validate and, recall what you were working on.
Good.
In this case, you can see here, this person was working on this doc. The doc itself, you'll notice, doesn't actually have the client or matter name anywhere in the content of it, but it is saved on their SharePoint, always on their server. We don't ever store the content. Saved in their SharePoint under a folder that's named after the client. And so that's an example of one of the context clues that we'll kind of use to infer what that client and matter is. It's not the only one, but there's a number of different ways that we kind of get there.
And we can also kind of look across different work streams too, right? So if you're looking at an email and then going to do a document, we can look across like what's happened in that kind of relative time range. Use that as a clue as well.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that we kind of get a lot of questions on is, with all the integrations that we have, as you can imagine, we are capturing a lot of your day and not all of it is necessarily billable, right? And so one thing that we do is we use AI to help auto filter things that we think are low relevance. So think of this as like a spam folder. When I toggle this, you can see that there are other time entries that show up, like a dentist appointment on your calendar, right? Or maybe you read an ABA journal newsletter, but it's probably not billable. You didn't take further action. We think it's low relevance, so we'll filter it out. And that really gets back to the point of we want your dashboard to be as close to that final product as possible. So you're not spending your time combing through every click that you made throughout the day, right? It really should be something that's like packaged up in a way that you would feel good about kind of sending that to the client. The other thing that we do is we make it really easy for people to kind of bill in different ways. So, Arvind talked a little bit about how each biller is different, and we've definitely found that to be true. Everyone has very heated opinions sometimes about how the time entries and bills should be. And so, we not only adapt to that with all the changes that you may make as you're editing, but we also make it easy for you to kind of deliver the bill that you want. So If you want something really granular, if your clients prefer an entry for every activity, there's a way that we kind of deliver that. That's kind of what you're seeing here. We also have different solutions to kind of auto bundle and auto merge related activity. And we also make it easy for you to kind of pick and choose and determine how your time entries look. So you can kind of merge everything under a client and it combines the duration and narrative, or you can automate that as well. So there's a lot of flexibility because we know that there's not one size fits all for billing.
So can you set universal options and then customize those by, say, client or matter? Is that how you do it, or is it each separate client matter gets set separately? Or
Yeah, Arvin, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so like we have a bunch of settings and preferences that like you can customize both at the firm and the user level for like a lot of these settings, like do you want to merge, related entries and things like that. And those can be for consistency, kind of set at an org level, and then the firm can decide whether they want users to customize that further. And then we also do have some things that you can customize at like a client level too. For example, like, you know, having like client billing guidelines, right? You can sort of like associate your guidelines that this client uses that'll get applied for the entries related to those clients.
I was actually going to ask you about client billing guidelines. So if I
Everybody
do
loves them,
have,
right?
well, not everybody, but I mean, it depends on, I mean, what size firm are you primarily targeted to? Do you have a particular target, or are you across the board?
We're across the board, but I would say our sweet spot right now, where a lot of the firms we work with are really mid-market. Which, everyone has like a little bit of a different definition of maybe what exactly mid-market is. But we actually, work with firms of all sizes from, solos and small firms to like that, 10 to 200 attorney firms, which is kind of what I would put in that wider, maybe mid-market bucket. And we're also, working with some larger like AmLaw 200 firms. So kind of across the range, but, many of our customers are in that mid-market segment today.
So in that mid-market segment, there will certainly be a number of firms that do have clients that do have billing guidelines. And are you able to incorporate their guidelines into the narratives that you're creating here?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So if they want something worded a particular way, or whatever their preferences might be, or even um, I don't know, the time spent in a deposition
Yeah. You don't want
tagged a certain way or something. I don't know. You can
Exactly.
you can
Don't
do
use the
this.
word research is one
Yeah.
we've heard before, things
Okay. Yeah.
things like that. And yeah, there are ways you can set those kind of guidelines at, again, like at a firm level that apply to all clients, or you can set them at a per client level to say like, and you can like, if you have a PDF and just say like, okay, I just want to upload the PDF of these guidelines, and then we'll take those and distill them into rules that then get applied for each entry.
Yeah,
Right.
and I
And
think
how is that done? Is that something that is done manually, or the AI is doing that, or
And
how
that's
do you
all
kind
AI
of?
driven. Everything we
All right.
do, I mean, almost everything we do is AI driven. Of course, then we have the UI for folks to be able to like make any
Okay.
adjustments they want, but it's all
All
AI
right.
driven.
Okay. Interesting.
yeah, and I think that's actually like a really key insight that we uncovered in doing research and talking to lawyers, because having our platform really respond to the like approvals and edits that people are making, that is really the ultimate bar of like what makes a good billing entry, right? You can have all of these like PDFs from the clients of like, do this, don't do that. I mean, half the time people don't read them, right? And it really comes down to what goes out the door on the bill and what gets paid, right? And that really is reflected in how people are actually drafting their entries. And that's why we really made that deliberate decision to kind of err towards the side of that implicit signal, really mapping to the user actions versus requiring them to kind of set up a million settings and set up keywords and things like that. Because one, that's labor intensive. No one wants to do that. But two, we don't find that that even really gets you to the place that you want as much as just seeing what you're approving and what you're editing.
And Nancy mentioned a little bit before, but we also try and do our best to incorporate like best practices into the base models, the base platform, so that what comes out of the box is something that works well for most people. Right. And we think that over time, we keep learning these as we work with more firms, with more attorneys, and we keep trying to feed that back in so that the system as a whole is just getting smarter, right? About like what are the best practices when it comes to billing.
Yeah. And as people are reviewing their entries, they can approve things and edit, obviously. And it's only those approved entries that ever go out the door. So there's, obviously like a mindfulness around the privacy of the user and making sure that we don't ever export or bill for anything that they haven't, approved and had their eyes on. And so you'll see, as you're reviewing your day, that indication of what you've already approved. And then everything that is approved can then go out the door for billing. For Clio users or my case users, we actually have a one-click sync where this button would send all of the approved time entries directly into Clio, directly into my case, and folks can then issue their bill as normal. So we really try to make it seamless and plug into your practice management systems as much as possible. We also work with a number of different firms that are on different practice management software. So we actually have, solutions that can kind of plug into probably a dozen or so practice management software. But Clio, in my case, are where we have that direct, deep integration, and it's that one-click sync.
Is there a, is that a one-way sync or is there a two-way sync there? I mean, if I want to get client information out of Clio into billables, can I do that?
Yes, yeah, it is a two-way sync actually. So yeah, the first part of that integration is getting all of the clients and matters from those systems. So we have ways to do that manually, bulk upload, or through our integration, like with Clio. In my case, it's just a one-time setup. So yeah, that becomes our source of truth, right? Of how we match that activity.
And as you mentioned, the privacy of the user and making sure we're never exporting anything they didn't approve. And just kind of expanding on that a little bit, also because privacy and security is just such an important point for everybody, as it should be. And one thing I wanted to note is that we never train shared models like across firms, right? We are never going to while we're personalizing this for each individual user, that is all very siloed and there's never any kind of cross training or general model training that could risk like data leakage from one firm to another, which is just, such a critical thing for so many people.
Another thing that's kind of come up a lot, and I'm actually curious, Bob, your stance on this is, there's a lot of conversation around the future of the billable hour and, and like different revenue models for firms. And it's one we get a lot, right? Because obviously our product is ostensibly really tied to the billable hour, which it is. But what we've been
You're
pleasantly
rooting for the billable hour is what you're saying.
I mean, to some degree, obviously, the people who bill hourly feel the most pronounced pain and have been, a lot of our early cohorts of customers. But I think what's been really surprising in a good way is we actually do have a number of firms that don't bill hourly. We have firms that work on flat fee, who bill on contingency. And at the end of the day, no matter how you're billing, time kind of becomes the universal measure. So even if you're billing flat fee, you need to know how much time you're spending on these different tasks, on these different clients, in order to set a fee where you're not underwater and losing money, right? And so what we've heard from a lot of firms, like on a flat fee basis, is they kind of set these fees. It's a little hand wavy and they just hope that they're actually coming out ahead at the end. And they don't revisit it a lot and they don't have the data to kind of validate those assumptions. And so that's where they come to us because one, they're not used to billing hourly. So they are actually bad timekeepers, right? For that reason, but they really want that data. They want to know how much time they're spending on client X or matter Y. And we're able to provide that with a lot of detail so that they can make informed decisions about their pricing model. And similarly with, contingency based compensation, it's also a group of practitioners that aren't used to billing hourly. So there's not that habit that's formed. But, at the end of a case, they do have to submit their time essentially, right, to the court. And then there's obviously different requirements there. And oftentimes they're trying to go back years in some instances to comb through their emails and figure out how much time they spent. And they lose a lot of time that way. And we work with a number of firms that have kind of relied on us to keep track as they're going. So they're not up a creek, when that happens at the end.
That makes a lot of sense, I think. I think, you know, the problem with keeping time is just the manual nature of keeping time, and nobody likes to do that. So if they don't have to do it, they don't do it. But if it's being done automatically, the value of being able to measure that time is huge, I would think. I mean, as you said, it goes into flat fee billing. I think that's a major issue for a lot of firms. As you say, they're afraid of using flat fees because they're just worried that it's not going to be an actual reflection of the time they're putting into it. And if they have some data that helps them better evaluate it, that makes a lot of sense. Also, just a time management uh, point of view. I mean, I'm one of those people like every day I'm like, where the heck did the day go? And what did I get anything done today? And I don't keep time. Uh, I think it would be really, I could see that it could be really useful. Again, if I don't have to be thinking about keeping the time, if somebody else is thinking about it for me, that's really valuable. I think I can see that.
I mean, it's funny, like we use the product ourselves, right, every day as part of our own like dog fooding and trying to make it better. And it's kind of, we don't bill our time, but it's still kind of amazing to see, that data, right? And like where we're spending our time and how that's changing over time and things like that is really cool.
Now I see like looks like a little analytics icon over in the navigation panel. Is that where you can kind of see some of that, or is
Yeah, exactly. So this is something we're, expanding more in, which is being able to provide reports on your activity, right? So you can kind of see your time spent on billable versus non-billable activity, what you have that's pending or approved. You can also view things by client and matter. And so we're building this out on an ongoing basis. We expect this to be even more robust, even in a few weeks' time. But it all goes back to what we're talking about, which is, we obviously are trying to solve a need of billable timekeeping, but I think the implications of what we could do with this information is really vast and can help a lot of different firms. And we're really excited to see where people take this because I think we're just grazing the surface right now.
yeah. I've got a couple of other questions, but before I get to those, I just want to see, is there anything else that you wanted to demonstrate here before I want to make sure we leave time for anything you wanted to show. We've got for like another 15 minutes or so.
I think that was it. Arvin, anything else we should highlight?
I think so. We showed like the different views, client and table and things like that, right? So yeah, I think most of the time folks spend in the platform is really on that dashboard view and really, quickly reviewing and approving their time. And those entries getting better and better is really the key thing.
Yeah.
Should I go ahead
So
and stop
one
sharing?
one big question I had is just what do people pay for this? What's it cost them?
Yeah, so we have different models depending on firm size, annual versus monthly. So our like base package, if you're like a solo or you're a single user going month to month, is $99 per user per month. Which we find that the vast majority of our users, tell us they recover like often on the first day, just in that found time that Nancy had mentioned before. There's so much that's getting like through the cracks because people aren't able to record it. But we also then have volume discounts and annual discounts available. So if you're more than 10 paying users, there's a 15% discount. And if you're on an annual plan, there's a 50% discount. And then for larger firms, we also do kind of right size deals depending on the total number of users.
You talked about the AI security, and you're not using this to train models at all. What about just cloud security? I mean, obviously, there's a lot of data coming into your system about clients. What are you doing to protect that?
Yeah, so it's sort of imperative in this field to be thinking about security from day one. We're fortunate to have a number of folks on our team that have deep kind of computer security backgrounds. So we have a pretty extensive, kind of documentation around our best practices that we're following around security, cybersecurity, and privacy. We do all the things that you would expect, like end-to-end encryption, right? We're not storing any of that work product like Nancy mentioned, the underlying documents or emails. We never store that on our servers. We just fetch them from Microsoft or Google, and then we process it, generate the entry, and then discard it so it doesn't stay with us. We're using isolated models, so there's no sharing, as I mentioned, all of the sort of standard best practices. And we've had third-party audits and scans and vulnerability assessments, and we'll continue to do that. on an ongoing basis. And we're in progress on our SOC 2 audits and continue to kind of go for those certifications as we keep growing.
Have fun with that.
Yeah.
So say I'm a smallish firm, 5 lawyers, a couple of support staff, a couple of paralegals. What's entailed in just getting up and running on this?
Yeah, it's actually quite easy. And I think part of the reason is because of our AI integration approach. So most of the onboarding, the setup, right, just involves kind of one click authorization. You click to enable, you sign into your Zoom account and authorize permission. And then that's all you have to do, really only in the beginning. And so for a lot of folks, obviously some people have different levels of access, not everyone has IT admin access. So depending on the setup, it can really be as quick as, within a 30-minute session getting folks up and running. But it usually is quite a light lift in terms of the actual integrations. And then with training and kind of getting people familiar with the platform, we've gotten really great feedback there in terms of how intuitive the dashboard is and how you can, without having to watch like a long training video, you can kind of intuit how you would approve entries, how you can kind of get to that end state. And so a lot of folks have been grateful for that because no one wants to sit through training sessions. And so we've really heard, especially from that mid-firm audience, that's been a really distinctive difference for them.
If firms want trials or demos of their own, do you do any of that?
Yeah, we have a 30-day trial and it's free. We don't charge for the trial and there's no obligation to continue. We want to make sure that it's working for each user and their software stack and their company and their workflows. And so that's really important to us. We want to ensure that we have happy users and we're not trying to force, a contract or a minimum number of users by any means. We really want it to be valuable and that we want people to find joy in using our product.
Anything that stops you from having to fill out timesheets brings joy to people. So,
Exactly.
I think that's all I had. Anything else you wanted to add?
I think maybe just, I think it's been awesome to see the feedback and the reception. We work with more than 100 firms today, and the number of people that have come back and said, like, this is just like you said, Bob, like, it's so amazing that I don't have to like manually fill out my timesheets anymore. It's been really rewarding, and like it's been a really cool thing to see. Uh, and I just think that there's so much opportunity in law firms and other like professional service organizations where there's still a lot of this manual work that really intelligent, skilled humans are spending doing kind of repetitive and unfortunate things that they really shouldn't have to do. And it's wonderful that like AI is at a point now where we can start to offload some of those things and really free them up to do the actual legal work, the creative work, use their judgment and the really challenging work. We're definitely like hearing that from a lot of people, which is great.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I did think of one other question I had. Um, this might be more like whether this falls under future plans, but I mean, one of the other sort of complaints I hear from lawyers a lot, other than billable hour, is context switching, and obviously using your platform requires some degree of context switching because if I'm working in Clio, I'm going to have to jump over to billables to kind of review my time entries and then back over to Clio. Do you see at some point these integrations getting tighter where that won't be necessary? Is that something you think about it all, or do you want to keep it the way it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think I could see worlds where maybe the lines blur a little bit and there's like maybe it's more obvious that something came from billables and Clio, or you can do more directly from Clio. I think that part of the way we've designed it is you don't need to keep it up while you're
Yeah,
doing other
right.
work. So you do have that ability to kind of come to billables when you want to. And I think, our goal is to make it as intuitive as possible, right? We want to be embedded in all of your workflows so that it doesn't feel like a major context switch or a major change when you're doing something. We intentionally try to stay away from like the chatbot style, application, because that always kind of takes people in a different sort of like mindset and like they have to do a bunch of work to figure out how to make it work for them. Like our goal is to make it feel like supernatural, right? Like this is just like what you would want it to look like when your timesheet is being generated automatically in the background.
That makes sense. And actually, that leads to one other question. Just is there anything else sort of on your roadmap that you wanted to talk about, or any other features you're working on that you're going to be bringing to market that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's a
Rules
lot,
to it.
I'm sure
a
there's a
lot
lot.
of to go. Yeah, I think we're going to continue to expand some of those direct integrations, very practically speaking, for folks that are on different practice management systems. So if there are ones that, your audience, sees and is like, hey, like this would be like really impactful, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. I think timekeeping and billing is just the start in many ways, like with the analytics that we showed. And as Nancy alluded to with some of that data, I think there's a lot of different use cases that we could help firms with kind of on that administrative, operational, back office sort of side of the world over time. And there's a number of other like really like cool features we can't really talk about yet coming just to make the timekeeping itself, easier and easier and even more automated. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening right now. So it's a really exciting time to be in this space.
All right. Well, when the cool features come out, call me. Let me know.
You'll be the first on the list.
All right. Well, thanks. I really appreciate it. That was really interesting. Looks great. Really good demo. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Thanks for having us.